Someone once said there's no worse feeling than when someone or something you love or even just like lets you down, changes, becomes something you hate, because then you're adrift and things that once made you feel good don't anymore. And then parts of your world have negativity attached to it. And for me, that's Star Trek. I love Star Trek. I love everything about Star Trek. I love the characters. I love the message that mankind can achieve great things if we all just put aside our differences and work together. It's a message that we sorely need in this world today, which is why this is so hard for me to do a negative review right now, because I'm tearing apart one of the things that gave me fond memories from my childhood has lasted with me for the entire time I've been alive on this earth. But when I sat down to watch Star Trek Discovery, which should have been joy at the prospect of a new Star Trek series, suddenly turned not only to hate but to outright revulsion. So much so that I didn't even want to do this review, but I felt I had to out of some sense of moral obligation. Nearly 2 years ago, the CBS Corporation, who are now the custodians of the Star Trek IP, announced that it was doing a new Star Trek series and putting it exclusively on their all-access service in the US as a way to get into the streaming game. The prospect of a new Star Trek series was tantalizing, but with countless delays and the firing of original showrunner Brian Fuller, asking the question, would anyone pay for a Star Trek series, was not enough. The question is now, would anyone pay for a bad version of Star Trek? Which this series undoubtedly is, probably the worst thing committed to screen since 1979's Star Trek the Motion Picture. To say that the pilot episode of this series, which looks like what some boardroom designed by committee's idea of what a modern Star Trek series should look like and sound like, is merely bad is an understatement. With plot points that range from senseless to downright inane, this two-part premiere is not just an exercise in what not to do when writing a science fiction series, but should actually serve as a case study in the types of mistakes you should be wary of not making in a basic screenwriting 100 class. Actors pose if they're at a convention cosplay contest and utter nonsensical, stiff, wooden dialogue as if it were Shakespeare. Characters make inconceivably stupid decisions that no human being would ever make, let alone officers in a quasi-military organization that prides itself on recruiting the best and the brightest. And worst of all, it attempts to pepper in bits and pieces from the original series as if it's paying homage to the source material, when in reality it's making a cynical effort to placate certain fans by duping them into believing that this is somehow connected to the greater universe, while it simultaneously takes 50 years of history and throws it in the trash. Sonequa Martin Green's character Michael Burnham, who's the focal point of this series, not only appears to have flunked out of the Vulcan Science Academy, but her actions indicate that she should not be allowed anywhere near a starship, let alone a hand phaser. Her character makes one horrible decision after another. Her actions result in an interplanetary war, her ship being destroyed, and most of her crew being killed, along with the destruction of the Federation flagship, the USS Europa, and the death of the Vice Admiral. From the very beginning of the pilot episode, Burnham, who allegedly was raised by Sarek, played by James Frain, who comes across less as a Vulcan elder and more as a discount Obi-Wan Kenobi, exercises none of the logic that Vulcans are known for. By the end of the two-part premiere, which was split between CBS and CBS All Access, she is not only assaulted and caused the death of her captain, played by Michelle Yeoh, she has also attempted to stage a mutiny, committed treason against the Federation, and landed herself a life sentence in a Federation prison. And yet, even after all that, she still feels as if she's the smartest motherfucker in the room. For her arrogance alone, Captain Catherine Janeway would have abandoned her in the Delta Quadrant a long time ago. She's in no way fit to serve aboard a Federation starship, let alone as the first mate of the SS Minnow. If this is an indication of the intelligence level Alex Kurtzman believed the officers possess, then it's a minor miracle that the Federation hasn't collapsed due to its own self-inflicted stupidity. The bad guys, as always, are the Klingons, or at least we're told they're the Klingons. They resemble the Klingons in name only, and when they speak Klingonese, none of it sounds like a natural language. The Klingon language sounds unnatural and laborious, as if it's being read off of cue cards and spelled phonetically. At a certain point, it would have been just easier if the Klingons had just spoken English. That is, of course, assuming that the actors could actually speak through the mounds and mounds of prosthetics they had to wear. There's far too much needless exposition on the Klingons' part, which as a result makes them uninteresting. They become so cartoonish at one point where you can easily remove the Klingon leader T'Kumva and swap him out with Snidely Whiplash or Cobra Commander, and it would not have made one bit of difference. His plan is to draw the Federation into an armed conflict in order to unite the 24 great houses and restore the Klingon Empire to greatness. And how will he do that? By attempting to lure a single Starfleet officer into a trap laid for them. A plan so ill-conceived it would make Boris Badenoff even say that's just fucking stupid. That's until you realize that this version of Starfleet is just as stupid to allow themselves to be willingly drawn into the trap. Many critics have defended these actions by saying, this is not your father's Star Trek, and in one sense, they're right. Your father's Star Trek would never have allowed the Federation to be portrayed exhibiting what can only be described as a Three Stooges level of incompetence. The one saving grace of the pilot episode is Doug Jones as Saru, a character whose primary concern is his own sense of self-preservation. This is a significant change for the Star Trek universe, as everyone usually seems all too eager to lay down their life at any time for any reason. The look of the show, which has been lauded for being spectacular, which at times is, gets dragged down by the sheer amount of information on screen. The viewer is overwhelmed with the sheer amount of data presented. And it becomes not only confusing, but feels as if you're deliberately being fed eye candy, as if it's an effort to distract you from the fact that there's no real story to speak of and just a bunch of loosely interconnected plot points. There are times when it feels as if producers Alex Kurtzman and Gretchen Berg had a series of effect shots planned, and then charged directors Adam Kane and David Semmel with finding some plausible way to make them work in the context of what they believed was a coherent story. A story which was shot through 1960s Batman-era canted camera angles and J.J. Abrams lens flares, making the action on screen not only uninteresting but downright annoying to watch. Star Trek Discovery talks a big game but strikes out at every conceivable level. What you have is not a big-budget science fiction series from a major network, but a very expensive-looking yet poorly acted fan film. The product of what some whom honestly believe that they know better and expect nobody to question their judgment at any point for any reason. This would ordinarily be the time where I tell you that I do not feel any joy in doing a review like this. However, this time, that is simply not the case. If anything, the only thing I felt during this review was frustration. Frustration that anyone could believe that this was a good idea. Frustration that somehow writers could create an abysmally idiotic character like Michael Burnham. Frustration that CBS believes that fans will just show up regardless of what the end product will be. And finally, frustration at a younger audience who they themselves insist on proclaiming to be smarter than everyone else, who honestly should know better, but obviously do not. Star Trek Discovery, Episodes 1 and 2, The Vulcan Hello and the Battle of the Binary Stars, gets 0 Chewbacca's and gets 1 Jar Jar. That's it for now. See you next time.
Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the minutes are gone.